The grand halls of Blackthorne Manor echoed with the sound of rain lashing against its towering windows. A heavy mist rolled in from the moors, casting an eerie pall over the ancient estate. Inside, Lady Eleanor Blackthorne sat by the dim glow of a single candelabrum, her fingers tracing the ornate carvings of a peculiar music box resting on the mahogany table before her. It had arrived earlier that evening, an unmarked package delivered by a shivering stable boy who claimed a veiled woman had entrusted it to him at the estate's gate. Eleanor, ever the skeptic, had hesitated to accept such an enigmatic gift, but curiosity proved stronger than caution. The box was an exquisite work of craftsmanship, its polished ebony surface inlaid with silver filigree forming swirling patterns that seemed to shift in the flickering candlelight. At its center was a small ivory crank. Despite the unease coiling in her chest, Eleanor turned the handle. The mechanism clicked softly and then, music. A haunting melody floated through the room, delicate yet strangely discordant, like a child's lullaby sung just out of tune. The fire in the hearth guttered as if a draft had swept through, though the heavy curtains remained undisturbed. Eleanor shivered but could not look away. The notes wove around her like whispering voices, each carrying a meaning she could not quite grasp. Then, suddenly, a whisper, real, distinct, and far too close. "You should not have played it." Eleanor gasped and spun around, but the room was empty save for her own shadow stretching long against the wooden paneling. The candle's flame flickered violently, sending erratic shadows dancing along the walls. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She told herself it was only her imagination, the tricks of a stormy night and a mind too willing to entertain superstition. And yet, as she reached for the box to close it, the melody played on, though her hand had never touched the crank again. The whispers grew louder. The oppressive silence that followed the thunderclap stretched unbearably. Eleanor swallowed, her throat dry as she placed the music box on a nearby table. The air in the room felt thick, heavy, as if charged with unseen electricity. Hawthorne took a step back, his hand trembling as he gestured toward the door. "Come, my lady. It is not safe to remain here." Eleanor hesitated. The logical part of her mind insisted that all of this was simply a coincidence. The flickering candles, the sudden chill, the imagined whisper. And yet, the weight in her chest told her otherwise. "Nonsense, Hawthorne. I refuse to be frightened by an old trinket," she declared, though the slight waver in her voice betrayed her uncertainty. The steward exhaled sharply. "Then forgive me, my lady, but I shall not remain here any longer." With that, he turned swiftly and strode out of the room, his hurried footsteps echoing down the corridor. Left alone, Eleanor's gaze drifted back to the music box. Its lid remained open, revealing the tiny silver ballerina within, frozen mid-pirouette. The melody had ended, but a strange sensation lingered, an expectation as though something unseen was waiting. Shaking off the unease, she lifted the box and carried it with her as she ascended the grand staircase toward her chambers. The halls of Blackwood Manor were especially dark tonight, the storm outside obscuring any moonlight. The sconces along the walls flickered as she passed, and the sound of the wind howling through the estate's ancient bones sent shivers up her spine. Upon reaching her room, Eleanor placed the box atop her vanity and sat before the large, gilded mirror. Her own reflection stared back at her, her complexion slightly paler than usual. With a deep breath, she reached forward and closed the lid of the music box. The moment she did, a faint sound echoed behind her. A whisper. She turned swiftly, her pulse pounding. The room was empty. Only the fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting shifting shadows across the walls. A trick of the mind, surely. Yet as she settled into bed, her mind restless with doubt, the silence was broken once more. A soft creak, like the slow opening of a lid. And then, the melody began to play again, on its own. Eleanor's breath hitched as the eerie melody drifted through the still air. Her pulse thundered in her ears, each note of the music box filling the room with a dreadful certainty. She was no longer alone. With deliberate slowness, she turned her gaze toward the vanity. The music box sat exactly where she had left it, its lid once again open, the tiny silver ballerina pirouetting in mechanical grace. The ivory crank did not move, and yet the melody continued, undisturbed. A gust of wind rattled the windows, but the heavy drapes remained motionless. The fire dimmed, casting long, wavering shadows that danced along the walls. A peculiar sensation prickled at the nape of Eleanor's neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. She swallowed, forcing herself to meet her own reflection. The woman in the mirror stared back, her expression unreadable, her face stark against the darkened room. And then, ever so slightly, her reflection moved. Eleanor recoiled. She had not moved, and yet the woman in the mirror had tilted her head, just the barest fraction, just enough to make her stomach churn with dread. A whisper. Low, distant, yet unmistakable. You should not have played it. The same words, but this time they did not come from within the room. They came from the mirror. A cold dread seized Eleanor's spine as she watched her reflection. It did not blink. It did not breathe. And yet it was watching her. With shaking hands she reached for the music box. If closing it once had not silenced it, perhaps destroying it would. Just as her fingers brushed against the cold silver filigree, the fire in the hearth guttered out completely, plunging the room into darkness. Silence fell. And then, a soft creak behind her. Eleanor whipped around, her heart hammering so violently she thought it might burst from her chest. The door to her chambers, which she had latched before retiring, now stood slightly ajar. Beyond it, the hallway stretched into blackness. A presence loomed there just beyond the threshold. A shape, undefined yet unmistakable, stood in the shadows. She could not see its face, but she could feel its gaze. Heavy. Unrelenting. The melody from the music box warped, slowing, twisting into something grotesque. The ballerina's movements faltered, her delicate form jerking as though resisting an unseen force. Eleanor's breath came in shallow gasps. Her limbs felt leaden, frozen between flight and terror. Then, as if released from an invisible grip, she lunged for the door, slamming it shut with all her strength. The whisper came again just beyond the wooden barrier. You should not have played it. Eleanor staggered back, pressing a trembling hand to her chest. Her mind reeled, grasping for logic, for reason, yet none would come. The storm outside raged on, wind howling through the manor's bones like a mournful dirge. The room remained cloaked in oppressive darkness, the music box silent once more. And then from the mirror, a sound that made Eleanor's blood turn to ice. A slow, deliberate knock. From inside the glass. Eleanor's breath came in ragged gasps as she stared at the mirror, her mind struggling to reject what her senses screamed was real. The knock had been unmistakable, 3 deliberate raps against the glass as if something, or someone, was inside waiting. Then the surface of the mirror rippled like disturbed water. Eleanor took a step back, her knees nearly buckling. The dim candlelight flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows across the room. A form began to emerge from within the mirror's depths, a woman veiled in darkness, her features obscured yet unmistakably watching Eleanor with an unnatural stillness. "Who are you?" Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. The figure did not answer. Instead, the veil seemed to shift, revealing a glimpse of a hollowed face, pale, ethereal, eyes sunken yet burning with something unnatural. A sudden gust of wind burst through the chamber, though the windows remained closed. The candle flames snuffed out, leaving only the weak glow of the dying embers in the hearth. The mirror's surface trembled, the reflection distorting further as the figure slowly raised a hand, pressing long, slender fingers against the glass. Eleanor staggered back, her hand instinctively flying to the music box. The moment her fingers touched the cool surface, the melody resumed, not sweet and delicate as before but slow, warped, and menacing. The whisper returned, a breath against her ear. "Let me out." Eleanor jerked away, her heart hammering. The figure's hand pressed harder against the glass, causing it to crack in delicate, intricate lines like spiderwebs spreading across its surface. "No," she gasped. "No, I will not." The whisper turned into a hiss. The figure within the mirror twisted, her veiled head snapping to one side at an unnatural angle. The cracks deepened, fractures running like veins of darkness through the glass. Then silence. The mirror stilled. The room remained cloaked in shadows, the air heavy with tension. Eleanor, trembling, lifted the music box. She had to get rid of it. Whatever force it had awakened, whatever presence now lurked within the manor, she could feel it growing stronger. Summoning what courage she could muster, she turned and flung open the door, stepping into the darkened corridor. The storm outside howled through the estate's vast halls, and the air smelled of damp stone and something older, something decayed. She had to find Hawthorne. He had known something. Perhaps he knew how to end this. Clutching the cursed music box to her chest, Eleanor moved swiftly through the corridors of Blackthorne Manor, unaware that the whisper had not faded. It merely followed, lurking in the shadows, growing ever closer. And in her chamber, the mirror's cracked surface shimmered once more. A hand, pale clawed, began to push through. Eleanor's steps quickened, her breath shallow as she moved through the dark, winding halls of Blackthorne Manor. The storm outside raged with an intensity that shook the very walls, but it was the whisper that haunted her, trailing her every movement, that truly chilled her to the bone. She clutched the cursed music box to her chest, its cold surface a stark reminder of the horror it had awakened. Every creak of the old floorboards, every gust of wind that howled through the manor's ancient bones seemed to amplify the feeling of something lurking, something waiting. Her mind raced as she searched for Hawthorne. He had always been a steady presence, the one person in the estate she could rely on in times of trouble. Yet she feared he might be the last one who could save her now. The veil of darkness that seemed to have descended upon Blackthorne Manor was thickening, its hold tightening around her heart. She found him in the old library, a place she had often gone to seek solace in her youth. The flickering candlelight reflected off the bookshelves, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. Hawthorne was there, standing by the hearth, his face drawn and weary as though he had been waiting for her. "I knew you would come," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. He didn't turn to face her, but his eyes, darkened by some unseen burden, seemed to follow her with a knowing gaze. Eleanor's voice cracked as she spoke. "Hawthorne, what is happening to this place?" "To me?" She trembled as she held out the music box, the melody now a low, almost imperceptible hum that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Hawthorne took a slow, deliberate breath. "It was always meant to be, Lady Eleanor. The music box, the spirit within it, the curse, it was bound to you from the moment it arrived." Eleanor's pulse quickened. "Bound to me? What do you mean?" "The music box," Hawthorne continued, his gaze fixed on the hearth, "was never just an object. It was crafted centuries ago by a sorcerer who sought to trap a powerful entity, an entity that could transcend the bounds of death itself. The music, the whispers, the shadows, they are not of this world. They are the remnants of something far older, far darker. And now it has chosen you." A cold, numbing fear washed over Eleanor. She took a step back. "I don't understand. Why me? Why now?" "Because," Hawthorne said, finally turning to face her, his eyes hollow, "you are the heir of Blackthorne Manor. This estate, this place is the key. It has always been the gate between worlds. The sorcerer, before his death, ensured that his curse would one day find its true heir. And you, Lady Eleanor, are the one who can either break the cycle or doom us all." Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. "What must I do?" Hawthorne's face softened, a hint of sorrow flickering across his features. "The music box must be destroyed. Only then can the entity be sealed once more. But it is not simple, Eleanor. The box, it has grown too powerful. The entity is already too close. Even now it is reaching for you." Eleanor's hands shook as she held the box. The melody began to rise in volume, a mournful wail that echoed in the stillness of the library. The air grew thick with oppressive energy. She could feel it, the cold touch of something unseen creeping closer, ready to take her. "I can't do it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't destroy it." "You must," Hawthorne urged, his voice low, urgent. "The longer you wait, the more it will consume you. You must act before it's too late." Tears blurred Eleanor's vision as she looked down at the box. She could hear the whispering once more, so close, so intimate, it was as though the entity was inside her mind. "Let me out." With a cry, she hurled the box into the fireplace. The flames roared to life as the box tumbled into the hearth, the silver filigree glinting for a moment in the firelight before it was consumed by the flames. The melody reached a deafening crescendo, a horrible, piercing scream that rattled the walls of the manor. Eleanor covered her ears, but the sound pierced through, reverberating in her very bones. Then suddenly silence. The fire died down, and with it, the weight of the darkness that had haunted the manor. Eleanor slowly opened her eyes. The library was still, the shadows retreating into the corners as the first light of dawn began to filter through the windows. The curse had been lifted. But as she breathed in the fresh, morning air, she knew the manor had changed. She had changed. "I'm sorry, Eleanor," Hawthorne said softly, his voice barely a whisper. "The cost was greater than I ever imagined." Eleanor turned to him, her heart heavy. "What do you mean?" Hawthorne's face was pale, his eyes dark with a sorrow she hadn't seen before. He took a step back. "The spirit you freed, its power was not just bound to the music box. It was bound to me as well. I have lived these many years as a servant to its will. But now I am free." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat as realization dawned. "You were the one who—" "Yes," Hawthorne interrupted, his voice trembling. "I was the one who brought it to you. I didn't know what it would cost, but I could never leave you in peace. Not when the curse was within my reach, when it was my fate to bind it to this place." Eleanor's world spun as she faced him, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she had not only freed the manor from the entity's grasp, but also doomed the man who had always been her protector. "I'm sorry, Hawthorne," she whispered, her voice breaking. A faint smile flickered on his lips. "It's not your fault, my lady. You were never meant to carry this burden. But now, you can live, truly live. The curse is broken. You are free." As the first rays of sunlight illuminated the library, Eleanor stepped away from the hearth, her heart both heavy and light. Blackthorne Manor was no longer a place of darkness and fear. It was her home once more, and now she was free. But as the wind whispered through the open windows, Eleanor could almost hear the faintest final note of the music box. A note of warning. Perhaps some curses never truly end. And with that thought lingering in her mind, she turned, her footsteps echoing down the hallway of Blackthorne Manor, ready to face whatever came next. The story is not real.